With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning. Thanks for tuning in to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson here with Lorrie Boyer. Morning, Lorrie.
Good morning.
So on Friday, we started talking about a topic and got completely sidetracked and ended up talking about something else. So we're going to go back to what we started talking about on Friday. And so this was a new interim rule from the USDA for technical guidelines for climate-smart agriculture crops used as biofuel feedstocks. So that's been really hard for me to spit out. So Lorrie, why don't you go ahead and explain a little bit about this?
You know, it took me a little while to understand what the 45Z clean fuel production credit is. It took me several interviews and a little bit of background to really understand. This term just kind of kept getting thrown out at me. 45Z, we're monitoring. I'm like, what is 45Z? So it is a federal tax credit. It's kind of hard to explain how it got its title. There's all numbered and have letters and all these things behind all these different tax credits that we use in the government. So that's why it's called 45Z, as this falls under one of those. And what it does is it gives a credit. And I admittedly have not sat down and read the whole rule between the last time we talked and now. We just have had so much going on here, and it takes a little while to read through that and getting caught up on some interviews and such. But it gives a credit for biostock feed producers, especially those that use climate smart agriculture practices. And there is a list of climate smart agriculture practices that are approved, I guess, if you will. The couple of ones that I talk about a lot are no-till and strip till and cover crops. I guess that's more than two, but those things are usually associated when we are talking about climate smart agriculture because they sequester carbon and have less CO2 emissions when you farm that way. At least that's what I've been told. And so farmers who are farming in those practices, and usually the biofuels crops, number one is corn, but I know that there's a lot of feedstock crops. There's wheat, there's all kinds of other crops that are being looked at, sorghum, and even, some of these vine crops are even being researched as that. And so they would grow these crops for the purpose of it going into an ethanol facility, which would then process and manufacture it into a gas that we call ethanol. I think everybody knows about that. And we even talk about that here in California with clean air standards and such. And it's cleaner burning. It's less carbon footprint, less nitrous oxide, better for many, many reasons, but we're still trying to get this infrastructure put into place to mass produce it. Now, coming up on this is what we call SAF, or sustainable aviation fuel, that is coupled with this. And now when we report a lot on 45Z, carbon, and SAF. And that is the way of the future. SAF is going to be something that we are going to see and talk about more and more quicker than we realize. And I've done a couple interviews on this, and I know I'm going on, but I'll shut up here in just a second. But the airplanes are now, or airplane manufacturers are now starting to make airplanes that can run on this SAF. And our other country partners, trading partners, are kind of watching to see what we're doing with this, because they too are looking at doing some of these types of things. So it's an evolving industry here domestically and abroad. And I did ask one of my interviews who pointed out the fact that it will be more expensive to fly because this is more expensive, better for the environment, but not as cost effective, at least not in the beginning phases. They are confident based on their surveys that people will pay. They will pay to have cleaner energy, but people like air travel, and they will pay the cost of it. So you've got lots of things going on in here. So back to this anyway. So these organizations, Renewable Fuels Association, for example, has really been wanting some guidance on what this looks like so that producers can start producing. But we needed a rule in place so that we know, kind of like we talked about with the tournament rule, we need the transparency on what are we producing? How much are we going to get paid? Where are we going to take it to? What's going to be accepted? What's not going to be accepted? And you've got the government in on this. So it is important to have a rule.
As somebody who flies a lot between California and North Dakota, I can tell you I do not like the idea of paying more to fly. I am all for making things more sustainable, and I believe strongly that we need to be taking better care of the earth and of our resources. But yeah, when you tell me that my airline tickets are going to cost even more because they've gone up so much recently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But, again, that's the price I pay for living where I want and working where I want, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the
Sacrifices.
like ticket prices aren't really part of the rule. I just kind of threw that in
Yeah,
because I think as if I'm a listener right now to what you and I are talking about, that's the first thing I'm going to think of is, okay,
right.
so this all sounds good. How much is this going to cost me next time I
Exactly.
want to get on a plane?
Exactly. And we do have some comments from Secretary Vilsack. We're going to go to our break right now. And when we come back, we will hear some comments from Secretary Vilsack on, do we call him former secretary now, I suppose? Former
Yeah.
Agriculture
Yeah.
Secretary Tom Vilsack, who announced this rule last week. But we will get to that when we come back. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. I am Sabrina Halvorson here with Lorrie Boyer, and we are talking today about a new rule imposed by USDA, announced last week by Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack. Again, I'll get used to this. Former Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack. And we do have some comments that he made while announcing the rule.
I think farmers are pretty well aware of the notion of no-till. They certainly understand cover crops, as we're seeing expanded utilization of cover crops around the United States, and a number of ways in which we've encouraged that at USDA. What we're doing here in terms of the field issues is we're expanding that option to include sort of a limited till option, which didn't exist under 40B. And in terms of the fertilizer, the energy efficiency fertilizer was included in 40B, but as part of a bundle. Now, in addition to it, we also have timing issues that can create potential reductions in a CI score that can be calculated. And we've indicated that the producer now has a choice whether to bundle or whether to use individual practices based on their own individual circumstance. One of the concerns of 40B was that not every farmer does all of these things at the same time on the same field. And now farmers will have the ability to do some calculations. They'll be able to say, well, what if I do no-till? What if I do inhibitors? What if I don't? They'll be able to make the best decision for their operation based on their individual operation. And I will tell you, the use of this calculator is really simple. I mean, it is really, really simple. I mean, it's essentially, you got to put your name in there. You've got to put the farm location in there. You got to essentially identify the practices that you're using and that you've essentially not come to this because of 45Z or made decisions recently to this, that you've been doing, you've been planting these crops for some time. Once you've basically certified to that and attest to that, you can run the calculations, and it is what it is. So farmers will find this easy to use, and they will find it very helpful in helping them make decisions about how best to position their farm, their individual farm, and for that matter, individual fields within the farm for utilization for biofuel feedstocks for SAF.
So that again, Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack last week. So Lori, what do you think about that?
I did want to point out that there's kind of two separate things in that soundbite. Is he's talking about the rule, but they also, USDA also released a calculator. So he was referring to that just in case folks didn't catch that or is wondering what is he talking about there. So they also put together a calculator so to use under the 45Z. It sounds good. I know that these groups have really been anticipating it. Gotten a lot of press releases with a lot of people applauding the rule. I haven't seen a lot of pushback on it yet, but I haven't opened all those emails either. So, so I might be speaking a little early on that. But I think that, I think of the Renewable Fuels Association, who has been working on this really hard. They are excited to at least have movement on this and get something going. Now, Vilsack's team and these organizations, said organizations are the Carbon Alliance and things like that, are now going to need to make sure to push our next administration, the Rollins administration, I'll call it that, even though she hasn't been confirmed yet, to pick up on this and to continue with this. But I think that these folks are really excited to have at least something rolling on it, having something to work with.
Right. And it's taken a long time to get to this point, and with a lot of input being given into it from all sides. And so to finally have something, like you're saying, finally have something tangible that's not just a working idea, I think is probably helpful for the industry. And this does move in the direction that many industry leaders were saying this is the way that we needed to go.
What I don't have is a lot of information on comment period on this. So I'll have to look
Yeah,
into that.
I haven't seen that either. And then, again, there's so many unknowns with heading into the new administration too. We don't know if this is going to be changed. I expect that there are going to be a lot of changes just across the board, not just in USDA, but in other, EPA, other areas as well with the new administration coming in, because it is such a different viewpoint from everything. And I think that a lot of people are going to be wanting to make their names by making changes. And so at this point, I don't know. I'm starting to wonder what's going to stick and what's not. But this seems like a sound rule that the industry is happy to have.
Yeah, and most of the Midwestern states, when I do those interviews, they've been waiting for this. A lot of the local farmers have been waiting for this and are willing to work under the climate smart farming practices. In a lot of cases, they're already doing that anyway. So why
Right.
not get the premium on that?
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, yeah, a lot of these practices they are already doing anyway. So, get a little reward for it.
I do believe that our conversations will turn towards now what more infrastructure looks like, because we're going to have going to need to have a lot more infrastructure in place to produce these biofuels, to produce SAF at a rate that this country needs it.
Yeah, I think that you're right. We don't have a lot of the infrastructure in place at this time, and that is something that we're going to have to remedy if we're going to continue to move in the right direction.
And I'm sure you and I will be talking specifically in the near future about California, because California has, well, I mean, we do every day. I don't mean that, but California has its own set of air standards that are
Yep.
unlike any other state. So
Yep.
that will be something that you and I will specifically be talking about and covering.
Exactly, and how it plays into the national plan as well. So, once again, something we will be keeping our eyes on. All right, we do need to take a break here. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Lorrie Boyer.
On the first part of the show here today, farm broadcaster Todd Gleason speaks with David May with the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank about the role that food banks play when it comes to catastrophes like the current wildfire situation in California.
I asked him first to tell me a little bit about how many meals or people they service in a given month.
The Los Angeles Regional Food Bank on average reaches about 900,000 people every month through our direct distribution programs and through our partner agency network. In order to distribute food locally in LA County, which is of course very large, we partner with about 600 other nonprofit organizations that might be churches or synagogues or mosques or non-religious organizations like YMCA and Boys and Girls Club. And those organizations help us to provide food to local communities from our large distribution centers. We have one in South Los Angeles and then another one in the City of Industry.
So now let's turn our attention to the issues of the day, the catastrophic events that are taking place in Los Angeles County at this point, the fires there. How does the food bank support the area and its needs, which are different, relatively speaking, than your everyday food and feeding programs?
One thing that is helpful in situations like this, in very unfortunate situations like this, is that we do have the pipeline and the apparatus and everything set up to deploy food relatively quickly throughout LA County. So some of what that looks like from a disaster response perspective is increasing the inventory to our partner agencies that are in affected areas or serving people in affected areas. And then, of course, we remain very connected to government and local organizations, and we can provide food assistance in bulk where needed, wherever government or other nonprofit organizations need it. For example, we're getting a lot of water right now that we're trying to deploy into into the affected areas.
How do you flex from 900,000 a month to whatever this larger number must be at this point?
Yeah, I mean, the way that we organize our operations is so that it is scalable, and what that means is that what we essentially do is scale more food resources through the pipelines that we have established and through the distribution channels that we have established already. We just increase that volume and then direct people to the food assistance as necessary. So we are able to scale. It seems like it's devastating, the experiences that many people are going through right now. But we're doing everything that we can to scale up food assistance into the community and make sure people are getting that nutritious food, water, and other household items.
What do you need most at this point?
Right now, at our primary distribution centers, we're collecting shelf-stable items as far as food donations. The easiest way for people to get involved is to go onto the website and make a financial contribution. That allows us to be flexible about how we deploy resources, and it allows us to be really nimble in our response. But for some people, financial donation isn't possible, so they want to make a food donation, or maybe they want to come in and volunteer. All of those are great ways to support the community at this time.
Do they do that directly through the LA Food Bank, regional food bank, or can they do it through Feeding America or other places?
We're happy at the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank in this emergency really is affecting LA County right now. We're happy to have people come to lafoodbank.org and find out about the many ways people can get involved. If you're passionate about helping everyone in LA County, then we direct people towards us. And then if you're interested in food insecurity at the national level, and it's an ongoing issue for many people, whether there's an emergency or not. And then Feeding America is a great organization, and of course, we're a partner food bank of Feeding America, and we're excited to have support at any level and any way that it can come in.
David May is with the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank about how the food bank manages to flex as there are catastrophes unfolding in its area.
The show continues right after this. Back we come here today in the second part of the show. I'm visiting with Rob LaRue now, and he is president of the National Farmers Union. We'll touch on several different things during our interview here today, including the new administration. But let's talk first off. We got the continuing resolution pushed through. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's great to be with you, Lorrie. And I think, well, as we sometimes say in the Midwest, right, it could have been worse. And I think that given all of the challenges at the end of the year, agriculture really did come together to ensure that at the very least that we got disaster assistance in place for those who have been impacted with crop losses and so forth. And then also the economic assistance, I think, was also critically important. We didn't get all the bells and whistles that we were hoping for, and so that just means that we still have some needs out there that need to be addressed. Biggest of that, of course, is the certainty of a farm bill. But I think given the challenges that we were facing at the end of the year, we ended in a good space.
Okay, well, that's a good way to start off here today then as we resume our discussions on the Farm Bill. Are you kind of just waiting to see what the Trump administration is thinking? Have you had any conversations to date so far on where they may be at with it?
Yeah, well, we started our conversations with the incoming administration very shortly after the election. We try to make sure that we hit the ground running with the incoming administration to make sure that they understand what farmers union members, our farmers and ranchers are looking for. And what the challenges are that they face. And so those conversations have been ongoing. Certainly now, as we are gearing up for the beginning of confirmation hearings for the presumed secretary, Brooke Rollins, I think that, conversations are getting a little bit more serious. And, all eyes are going to be on the Senate in particular here in the beginning. As they get their committee up and going and they get confirmation hearings underway. And they are also trying to figure out how to move forward as quickly as possible on a farm bill.
All right. Well, what are your thoughts here with the Trump administration coming in? What have some of these early conversations been like so far as how the ag sector will fare?
Well, one of the ways that I like to talk about the issue, because folks get captured by the headlines that are often out there by either the president-elect himself or by those who may be part of his cabinet. And I always caution folks that, until we have the president sworn in and in place, and we have his cabinet officials also in line. I don't want folks to lose their focus, if you will, on what the needs are. So we're trying again to make sure that we're educating the president-elect's team about what we want to see in a farm bill, get that stronger safety net there that we need, and the fact that overall we need a farm bill that can meet today's needs and prepare us for the next, hopefully, a 5-year farm bill.
As you mentioned, there is a lot of rhetoric going around right now, and I know there's a lot of concerns over what he is saying, what President-elect Trump is saying about tariffs. Should we be concerned? What do you know about that so far?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty clear, right? Given what the president in his first term did and what he has been saying now, without, again, getting too distracted by the specifics of what level of tariffs there might be, whether they might be imposed on our neighbors to the north and the south. I think a lot of what we're trying to do right now, Lorrie, is prepare. And that includes a lot of education to the potential incoming secretary and others that are going to be part of this transition so that they understand, first of all the really negative impacts that happened with the last trade war. And if they are looking to do things differently or, however they choose to approach it, unfortunately, we know that agriculture ends up being targeted for a lot of retaliation. And so if this is the direction that they're going to take, at the very least, agriculture needs to be there needs to be a system in place, whether it's through payments or other protections in place. Look, at Farmers Union, we understand the value of using tariffs occasionally and in a very strategic way. But at the end of the day, it has to be done in such a way that the folks who are producing the food and fiber and fuel for this country are protected.
Rob, what are your thoughts and what are you hearing about President Trump bringing the Panama Canal under U.S. control?
I'm going to say, Lorrie, that may be one of the things that we just need to kind of wait and see what the president's saying a lot of things right now. He's also, I guess, suggested changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico. I think that there's a lot of talk going on right now. If they are serious about this, I know that Congress will have a say in that, and they will make sure that they have a say in that. And so, again, for us right now, it's focused on making sure that if tariffs are coming, that Congress understands the effects of that the incoming USDA leadership understands the impacts of that, and that we can have the tools in place to be better protected. And then almost kind of concurrent with that, as the administration gets underway, keeping our eye on getting this farm bill finally across the finish line.
Yeah. Any more or any changes, I should ask you, any changes since the last time that you and I have talked about the farm bill that the Farmers Union wants in the farm bill at this point, or any other, deviations on what we originally talked about being in there?
Yeah, I think that the fundamentals are still the same. And that is, particularly now with the economic challenges out there, right? And folks are struggling to make ends meet, make things pencil out, if you will, as they sit down with their banker and their lenders. We have to have the tools in place to be able to keep farmers farming, even through this tough phase right now. So ensuring a stronger safety net, ensuring strong crop insurance, while also making sure that we're keeping those investments that folks really like on important items like conservation spending. Those fundamentals, I think, remain. If there's any kind of reset right now, it's really kind of looking at, with the eye of a incoming Trump administration and a new Republican leadership in the Senate. What are their goals? And we've had a number of conversations. We know that they want to get a farm bill done soon. We know that as part of that and the strong safety net, they also want to do what they can to reinvest in rural America. And we're on board with that kind of talk. We'll have to wait and see exactly what that looks like. But a lot of conversations going on right now with the new leadership and our new ranking members in both the House and the Senate, and Senator Klobuchar at the Senate Agriculture Committee, and Congresswoman Angie Craig as the new ranking Democrat in the House. We're making sure that the Farmers Union voice is out there.
That is Rob LaRue, president of the National Farmers Union. I'm Lorrie Boyer for AgNet West. Stay tuned. Sabrina Halvorson joins us next.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
For this segment, I'm handing the mic over to Susan Littlefield, who is with the Rural Radio Network, and she is talking about farmland values. She is interviewing Dr. Bruce Sherrick, who is a professor of farmland economics at University of Illinois. Here's Susan Littlefield.
I wanted to start out just talking about farmland values. As you look at the big picture, of course, everybody always wonders, where are we going with farmland prices for those beginning farmers out there? Are they being priced out of the market? The retiring ones, are they losing a value? What is the overall picture?
It's something that everybody's really fascinated by right now, because we came out of a period for the last 3 years with really rapid increases. And then this year, especially the latter half of 2024, prices pulled back a bit, and we're kind of starting to say, well, where are we headed? Is this the beginning of a substantial pullback or not? But I think markets are incredibly good at aggregating information. So I think everything makes sense if you look at it carefully. Just to continue the line of thinking, people recognize that farmland is what you can earn from owning it. In some sense, if incomes are higher, the land should be worth more. If your interest rates are higher, the land should be worth less. And farmland has proven itself to be an incredible inflation hedge. So if inflation is higher, farmland values tend to go up. So we're trying to, in this publication that we distributed at the Expo and in other ways, we always try to say, can we make sense out of what we see? Does the market have any signals in it? What will impact it going forward? And I guess the summary point is that what will impact it going forward has more uncertainty about it right now than we have had in the last maybe decade or so.
What do you see some of the biggest influences at this point?
We have inflation that appears to be, higher for longer, according to both the Fed and the stance of financial markets. People are recognizing that the incoming administration will have changing priorities on renewable fuels or decarbonizing the energy complex, perhaps, and questions around trade policy and tariffs in particular. At the same time, we didn't get a farm bill written, but we got an extension. And on top of the extension, we seem to have become comfortable with ad hoc payments again. So we have, another disaster bill or another payment bill in the works. And so I think this just understanding the income used to be, based on what you grew in markets that you could somewhat predict, things that you talk about every single day. Now we don't know if income is dependent on a trade issue or an extra payment or a disaster or a change in the subsidy rate on crop insurance or any number of things that we used to not have as high on the list of, potential problems.
Do you see one region hotter than the other when it comes to land values at this point?
Oh, that's a great question. I've always described it like the middle of the country, the Corn Belt in particular for row crops, is kind of like the head of the slinky. You pull it, and the rest of the country, the Delta in particular, kind of catches up. The Pacific Northwest, to some degree, is kind of like a middle of the country with extra options, lake states and further up. But I think California is, a country unto itself in some sense, and so dependence on tree nuts and vegetables and fruits are a little higher there. The middle of the country, anything that produces primarily corn and soybeans. Then there's the part of the world that is wheat growing. But the new wild card is livestock. Livestock has done pretty well in the last couple of years, while row crop producers' incomes have been pretty strained by lower commodity prices. So I think in addition to the region of the country, it's what you're growing. People in the public press narrative would say farm income is really, really off. Well, in fact, it's the 8th highest in record, but the composition is different. Lower for commodity producers, higher for livestock producers, and concentrated in parts of the world that are parts of the country that are maybe not as traditional. And then with extra forms of things like government payments and crop insurance proceeds, it's not as uniform or smooth as it used to be.
So you talk about it from a livestock perspective. Are we seeing more of it cattle? The expansion we've seen, for example, in the Midwest for poultry. What is the driver?
The driver is lower feed costs. And so as commodity prices are down, you have higher profitability in something where you had primary source of the expenses being feed. The long-term, I'll sort of jump way into the future too, though. The long-term thesis, or the demand for calories that are multiplied up because you feed them to livestock first, is also a trend that I don't see any possibility of reversing. The world is getting richer, eating more meat as developed diets want more meat, chicken and pork and beef. You have to take that grain that you could have turned into a starch or something that we put into a food product, or feed 9 calories to a pig to get a calorie back for human consumption. So that demand for stuff you grow in the ground eventually will be there. But for now, it's really just the expansion of the demand.
This is the AgNet News Hour. We will continue with this conversation right after this.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. We continue now with Susan Littlefield, who is speaking with Dr. Bruce Sherrick, who is a well-known agricultural economist and farmland expert. He's also professor of farmland economics at University of Illinois. Here's the conclusion of the interview.
Speaking of expansion, we see the inquiries that happen, PNW, California, even Idaho, saying we want to move to the Midwest, bring our dairy operations here. It's getting too expensive for us, but we know we can afford to make that move. You had some interesting thoughts as to why and how we're seeing those movements happen.
Oh, gosh, I don't know if they're interesting thoughts or out loud questions. I think dairy is very, very driven by scale in one sense, and so having enough scale to be a really low-cost producer with modern technologies, both on herd health and on milking systems, having enough space to get rid of manure, things like that. We kind of attracted an awful lot of high throughput, super large dairies in a few parts of the world. So Idaho, people know about, California, Arizona. And we still have elements of the old style dairy systems in Wisconsin and Minnesota and New York and scattered about. I think that this is like every other economic system. As scale changes, where you can have enough scale but not have to use it up because of shipping costs. If you produced all the milk in exactly one point in the middle of the country, you still have to get it to the coasts, right? So this combination of where inputs are less expensive, and for dairy cattle, keeping them healthy is a very big expense. So how far north or south, how far from the equator you are is a big determinant. Feed prices, though, really, really big difference, and demand and how much it takes to get it transported to where it's consumed.
For those young producers or those wanting to come back and get involved with farming, what is the outlook for them? Is the opportunity there, knowing where interest rates are at and where the world economy is? What are you hearing that what they want to do?
Yeah, it's a story that you hate to have to tell sometimes, but the minimum viable scale of agriculture is not something that necessarily an individual can just start up and do. I sometimes use the example with students that, so I like shoes. I can't just start a shoe factory. It's too big. And so if I want to be in agriculture, it's probably the case that you're not going to just start up from scratch. So the average age of an asset owner in agriculture is going up, but the average age of operators is somewhat steady, or in some cases going down, because as units get larger, the number of people who have to work there goes up. And that tends to be how younger folks are entering agriculture now, is starting with a dad or an uncle or a cousin or a grandma or somebody who can partner with them, because the capital stack required to start is generally just too high for an individual.
Finally, as you look at the rest of 2025, since we're still into January, what's the one optimistic thing you see when it comes to farmland values?
Oh, gosh, there's a funny joke for economists that say if you give a number, don't give a date. If you give a date, don't give a number. And if you're right, don't act surprised. And so I think the long-term outlook for agriculture is absolutely uniformly positive. I don't see anything that reverses the fact that you can't change where on the planet you grow things. The population of the planet is going to keep going up, and the place we're going to have to feed with that limited amount of land is going to mean that that's got to be very positive. In the next year, what I think of as positive for agriculture is a little tougher. I have more on my things I'm concerned about list than things I'm happy for. But I think the support for agriculture in the form of crop insurance and conservation support and other things is actually quite good. The one positive turn for agriculture in general is that, and this is a good answer to your question in some sense, it's just not a one-year question. So in addition to 2025, I do recognize that agriculture had been blamed for everything for so long. And 27% of the methane and 20, kind of the whipping point. And now agriculture is being viewed as a solution. So greening of the energy complex, renewable fuels, and again, the administration has a different view. The incoming administration has a different view, no doubt. But society's efforts to continue to move toward greener sources of energy, a demand for knowing more about sustainably grown production by most consumers. I think that the tide has turned and agriculture is now literally part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
I guess I do have one follow-up question. Geopolitical concerns. Do you see that weighing in on what we see as our bottom line, financial survival?
Absolutely. Again, we're both at an expo today where a lot of the speakers were talking about geopolitical concerns, and you can disrupt a lot with something like a Ukraine war or a trade war that is financial only is also very consequential. You don't have to have soldiers on the ground to have a bit of a battle. I think those are kind of at a tipping point or a place where a small spark could set off a big reaction. I do worry about that a lot, and I hope that we can, be modern and honest and real and work through those in perhaps better ways than we might have in the past.
So for our listeners out there that want to read some of the things that you write, where do they need to go?
I'd say a couple of places. The FarmDoc website is a place that my colleagues and I at the University of Illinois publish one original research piece per day, and it's got a lot of great tools for looking at agricultural issues. Just FarmDoc, if you Google that, you'll always find it. But it's a great program for getting extension and other things out to people. But I also invite people to send questions back through that same conduit, because we're always looking for what are the issues on the top of minds of producers and how can we be of greatest value back to the farmers in the U.S.
That's our show for today. This has been the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson for Lorrie Boyer and myself. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.